Hello, my name is Kirsty Lewin. I'm a Senior Climate Resilience Manager at Sniffer. Sniffer is a sustainability charity based in Edinburgh. We bring people together to create a flourishing and fairer future for all in a changing climate. In this short session, we will look at Scotland's changing climate and some of the impacts we're already experiencing. I'll talk through the meaning of adaptation and climate resilience. I'll highlight work already undertaken on climate impacts in the Outer Hebrides and then look at potential adaptation actions. So, what's been happening to Scotland's climate? Over the last few decades, Scotland has experienced a warming trend, shifting rainfall patterns, and rising sea levels. Even since this visual was created a few years ago, things have already changed much faster than we expected. In fact, the warmest year on record was 2022. There's been an increase in rainfall with less predictable, very heavy bursts of rain, and we're also seeing droughts. Mean sea level has risen approximately 1.4 millimetres per year from the start of the 20th century. As you'll know from your own experience and from news reports, these changes have resulted in devastating storms, floods, and wildfires, as well as coastal erosion. And some of these events have led to tragic losses of life. We're experiencing damage to essential infrastructure and serious impacts on wildlife and habitats. This in turn is impacting on people's health, well-being, and their livelihoods. While global emission reductions will determine the extent of changes to our climate, changes are already baked into the climate system. The changes we are seeing now are projected to continue and to intensify. Adapting to these changes in the climate is thus critical. It's important to understand what we mean by adaptation and climate resilience. Very simply, climate change adaptation is any action undertaken to reduce vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. Adaptation can lead to climate resilience. Climate resilience is the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to hazardous events, trends, or disturbances related to climate. In essence, building resilience and adapting to climate change is about becoming better equipped for the present and future changes. Considerable work has already been undertaken in the Outer Hebrides. The Outer Hebrides Community Planning Partnership Climate Working Group has looked at how the climate is changing and the impacts on the people, environment, and economy of the islands and the case for action. Our climate story, through Climate Hebrides, gives islanders a chance to pin on a map photos, stories, and short films that show their concerns and ideas for action on climate change. If you haven't done so yet, do input your experience of climate impacts onto the map. Our climate story is being delivered in partnership with Sniffer and funded through the Community Knowledge Fund, funded by UK Research and Innovation and delivered by the Young Foundation. The working group is supporting our climate story towards the ultimate goal of an Outer Hebrides community action plan. We can now look at the types of climate impacts already experienced or expected in island communities, including the Outer Hebrides. The remote location of the islands increases their exposure to climate impacts, and although each island is distinct, we can draw out impacts that are likely to be seen across the islands. The Outer Hebrides Community Planning Partnership Climate Change Working Group has identified hazard impacts. They include risks to lives, health and well-being, disruption and damage to transport infrastructure, including roads, causeways, and ferry cancellations, damaged water, sewage, and drainage infrastructure, loss of archaeological, ecological, and heritage sites, disruption to economic activities, including tourism, fishing, and crofting, as well as disruption to supply lines for goods and food, and of course damage to ecosystems and loss of species and habitats. Specific examples that local people have identified through our climate story include the drying out of lochs, small streams, and rivers during droughts with potential impacts on wildlife, for example, putting the chicks of nesting divers at risk, and storm impacts on woodlands, including a native woodland planted by local people as a sanctuary for wildlife. We can now turn to potential adaptation actions. This slide shows the types of actions that might be undertaken in remote island contexts such as the Outer Hebrides. These include inspecting, maintaining, upgrading, and climate proofing where possible essential infrastructure, for example, water drainage and sewage systems, relocating essential infrastructure, for example, roads, using nature-based systems where appropriate, for example, dune systems, planting trees to stabilize slopes, increasing the resilience of harbors and ports, using climate-sensitive designs when developing new or upgrading existing buildings, diversifying trees, crops, and agriculture, having community hubs, locations for response equipment, including sandbags, shovels, batteries, etc., and of course, having emergency response plans to protect and support the most vulnerable people and communities. That's the end of this presentation. I hope you found it helpful. Please join the Outer Hebrides Climate Hub to access training, ideas, funding, guidance, and support. And do get in touch with Climate Hebrides for further information. Thank you for watching and listening.